people are only seeing up to a certain point. They're not realizing that, 10 years later, me and my family, are still fighting a battle that nobody else sees.
Work in law enforcement. I do law enforcement oversight. You're a former championship boxer. You're in the military.
You throw stuff into your imaginary closet and you close the door.
I was particularly triggered by seeing the actual footage of the event that took place.
When stuff stops fitting in there and the door flies open and all of it falls down upon you, life hands you a shit sandwich sometimes. It might come in a poop sandwich, but it's coming out of filet mignon because I'm going to make sure that it happens.
Okay, here we are. I'm super excited about this interview. Ran into you in early August, Miss Ann Carrizales.
Yes, you even rolled your R's. I'm super impressed.
I tried. Your story was very impactful for me, given the nature of some of the things that you've experienced. Your background is very impressive. You work in law enforcement. I do law enforcement oversight. You're a former championship boxer. You're in the military, and you're a mother, and you survived some pretty traumatic experiences. So why don't you tell your story about how you got into work and what you're up to now?
Yes, I have survived some stuff, haven't I, Aaron? What kind of podcast is this? First, tell me, is this like a PG-13? Is it free flow speak? Like, what is it? Tell me what the rules of engagement are.
The only rule is that you share your story in a way that other people can glean some influence from, or glean some gems and improve their own lives from just how you are as a leader. But nothing's off the table. It's not filtered at all. Feel free to express yourself the way that you did when I met you.
Oh yeah. He says feel free to express yourself the way you did when I met you. It was really nice meeting you in Sacramento, by the way. I was very impressed that you made such an effort to be there at the last minute, if my memory serves me correctly. Yeah. So you went to the women's conference in Sacramento, and I got to meet you, and I have to thank you again for participating the way that you did. I kind of put you on the spot there, remember?
You did. You put me on the spot. Gave me a testimony leaving there.
Yeah. Everybody has a testimony, I think. And I want to thank you for inviting me to come and kind of share mine with you and your viewers. I know you said you were really impressed about the different hats that I wear, and you want me to tell your viewers and listeners about it. I would have to say, first and foremost, though, I'm most proud of the role of mom. For me, being mom to Joseph and Michaela, who are now 30 and 21 years old, and fellow Fight After the Fight co-presenters with me. They actually present with me in part 3 of the 3-part series of the Fight After the Fight.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
to see that, but
right. What you sat through was part 1. So part 1 is Fight After the Fight, 3 rounds and counting, in which I take you through the 3 rounds of the most difficult rounds of my life. And round 1 being, professionally, my first officer involved shooting, and then round 2 being my second, and then round 3 being the most difficult part of that whole process, which I coined the Fight After the Fight. So you sat through that, and I kind of recount all of that and tell the story to people who want to sit and listen. And I do that because I want people to be able to look and see beyond what they see, what you usually see. And what do you usually see? You see like the blurb on the internet and the video, and people watch that, and then they kind of draw their own conclusion from that as to, what happened, what didn't happen, what was right, what was wrong, whether or not you agree and think the officer did a great job or not is really neither here nor there. That's where it kind of stays. And there's no real glimpse into the reality of what happens beyond that. So I always say, as law enforcement, they train you to be prepared to win, the fights and the battles. And I don't mean just, I mean literally and figuratively speaking, the fights and the battles that you face on the street in the capacity of your job duty, but they don't prepare us for how to win the fight that comes after the fight. And that's what I found out after being involved in those critical incidents and realizing that, people are only seeing up to a certain point. They're not realizing that, 10 years later, we're still, me and my family, are still fighting a battle that nobody else sees. And I felt it was really important to share that. And I felt it was really important to share it in an honest way, in a way that didn't feel scripted, that didn't feel fluffed and full of, a bunch of bullcorn, and was just honest. And so that's kind of how I wanted to present that. So I created the program, and it started with Fight After the Fight, 3 rounds and counting. And then it's the Fight After the Fight part 2 is Train to Win, in which we kind of take a deeper look into the opponent that I'm specifically referring to in the series, which is the unresolved traumatic stress, unresolved critical incident stress, cumulative traumatic and critical incident stress, just stress as a whole. Unresolved trauma is the opponent, and we see that more laid out and illustrated in part 2, Train to Win. So we study the opponent in part 2. We learn about how to fight back. What are some of the best techniques? And you hear me say the rounds and the opponents and punch combinations. And I say that because I do present the whole entire presentation and series from the position of a fight champion.
I had no idea what to expect. I've done a lot of group relations in the past where, we have difficult conversations, kind of like how the conversation that you led, the you go, I go. But I was particularly triggered by seeing the actual footage of the event that took place. So luckily your niece was there, who was a trained psychologist, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Right. She is actually in getting her PhD in psychology. Mm-hmm. So she's almost there, but I brought her in for those reasons, to be there as the clinician, as the trained person in the room. But also to kind of further her mission, and kind of her mission is also to kind of understand how this deeply impacts the stress. The psyche of the law enforcement officer is deeply affected. So she's, asking us all the right questions and asking us to participate in all the studies and things like that, which she did while she was there as well in Sacramento. But in order for her to do her part better, she needs to understand us, and we need to, be more open. So that's kind of why I had her there that day. And, also because people are like you triggered. Did you feel something when you watched the footage of the shooting?
Yeah, I felt a lot of things. I felt like I was losing control of my composure, my emotions, and I think you kind of saw it on my face. But mm-hmm. Would you mind kind of giving a synopsis of that part or that?
So no, not at all. So you want me to go into the incident about what happened? Okay. So just to kind of finish the thought process I was having previous to what we're going into now, part 3 of that series is Fight After the Fight Through a Child's Eyes. Through a Child's Eyes is essentially what part 1 is doing, me recounting that trauma and giving you a glimpse into what that looked like for me, that perspective for me, right? But Through a Child's Eyes gives you the perspective of the child. And that's the part we really don't hear. I mean, as it stands, you don't hear from the officer. And so I'm going to tell you today, a lot about how that felt and what that looked like for me. But we normally don't hear that unless you just happen to be really close with somebody who was involved in something like that. And then that person's still willing to share. Yeah. But we really don't ever... The public doesn't really ever get to hear the perspective of the family, the spouses, the children. And so that was my way. That is our way of giving the attendee, the listener, the person who's there, the opportunity to see that perspective. So you kind of get to hear my perspective in part 1, then we study the opponent in part 2 and create strategies to win while you're in that fight, should you find yourself or you or a loved one find yourself there. And then part 3 gives you the insight into the effects on family, so particularly my children. And what is it that, say again?
That's got to be really important too for women in law enforcement, right? That have children, and it affects them in certain ways. What your mom goes through really has an effect on you.
Yeah.
So I can see that being a huge part of the training, which have
you ever heard of the I don't even know want to say the phrase, but have you ever heard of the concept of the mother wound?
Yeah, I think I just heard about it from my sister.
Yes, the mother wound. Um, go down the rabbit hole of researching that. A friend of mine kind of turned me on to that, and there's a speaker who does lectures and talks, and she's not just a speaker, from my understanding. She's I think she's an author, and I don't know. I'm not sure. She may even be a psychologist. I'm not sure. I could be wrong, but she's the go-to on this. And if you Googled, the mother wound, I'm sure you'll come across this person. But it's really interesting, and you are spot on, Erin. The traumas and the unresolved stressors of the mother have every impact on the child. It's so true. So if you want to heal the child, I've heard it said, you want to heal the child, heal the parent, heal the mother, heal the father. So you're right. It is important for women, but I don't want to, I definitely don't want to take away from the father as well. Like, it's, as a parent, it's difficult when you have all this unresolved trauma, and we bring that baggage into our adult life from childhood. All of us do as humans. And then before you know it, our children are suffering and struggling through things that have everything to do with our own unresolved traumas, our own, history and generational dysfunction that we've carried into our own parenthood. And so that's what my kids and I are very cognizant of, and we're intentional in working on things in our own lives so that we don't drag that into our child. Both of my kids, I don't have any grandkids yet. Kind of salty about it. That's my little jab at my kids right now on your podcast. So yeah, I'm 52. I'm Hispanic. I'm a Hispanic woman that is 52 with no grandkids. So there's that. But yeah, no, we talk about it all the time. And I say, hey, you got to work on that. Or, hey, that's something you might want to, navigate or sort through or work on, because you don't want to take that into your parenting, and it's very true. We do. I did. I navigated 2 shootings. I don't know which one you want me to start with, but I had them both in the month of October. One was October 2012, and one was in October 2013. Obviously, there was a whole lifetime that led up to those moments, from my childhood to my young adult life, from my military, my boxing, and all of that. But I really had no idea that the things that I had learned and applied in both my military and athletic career as a fight champion, a boxing champion, I had no idea that I was going to use those things I'd learned and apply them to not only survive in the moment of the incidents, but also in the aftermath. So that's really fascinating for me to learn about myself. I feel like in order to understand how I navigated those incidents in 2012 and 2013, we would have to go back. You want to go back? Let's go back. So I was born to Joe and Rebecca, and my daddy is a warfighter. My father is a dual service military veteran. He served in the Army, and he also served in Vietnam when he was in the Army. So when he gets back from Vietnam, like most of those Vietnam vets, he didn't adjust well. He had a lot of what we now know was traumatic stress, unresolved traumatic stress, which manifested itself into the injury of post-traumatic stress injury. So he's dealing with all that. He's not adjusting to civilian life and joins the Marine Corps. So I like to say Dad was in the Army, and then he got out of the Army, and then he got smart and joined the Marines. Because as you know, I am a Marine Corps veteran. So so that's the way I like to tell the story. I don't know if Dad would agree with me on that. I have to ask him. I never did. But yeah, so he's a vet. I was raised by a Marine Corps veteran, Army veteran, Vietnam veteran. And as a result of my dad's, traumas and things that were unresolved, we suffered a lot at the hands of my dad. And so domestic violence was a very real and present thing in my family. So I grew up, tough, suffering violence with my mother and my older brother at the hands of my father, who was really struggling with a lot of that internal rage and anger and just not understanding what was going on with himself because he was under attack. He himself was in the fight after the fight, and we just didn't know anything about that stuff back then. So a lot of times we would go over and hang out at my uncle's house to get away and play with my cousins. And that was always great, except, while I was there, I was suffering additional abuse and trauma at the hands of a dirty old man who lived downstairs from my uncle. So I was being molested. I was being physically abused, and just having to navigate things that really no child should ever have to navigate. But, again, hindsight is always what? 2020. Yeah. So looking back on that stuff, realizing now that, all of this had its purpose. I guess that's at 52 years old, and I've been able to really look back with a clearer lens and say that all of that had its purpose, and it was experiences that I had to go through to kind of build me and mold me into the woman that I was supposed to become later. I ended up joining the Marine Corps at 18 years old. Last time my dad ever was physically abusive to anybody in our family was when I was 13 years old. So I actually watched my father just really take ownership of what was happening in the house. Even though he didn't understand why it was happening, he understood that there was something in him that was broken. And he found, the Lord, he found God, and changed his life, and became very immersed in his faith in the church, and brought his family along for that, journey. So we were all now going to church actively and learning about God, and things like that. And then he eventually went to the school of preaching and became a minister. So my daddy really was the first example for me in that we do have a choice in what we do with, what do they say? Life hands you a shit sandwich sometimes. And I always say if you've ever heard me speak, it's never exactly the same every time you hear it, but I like to say it may go in a shit sandwich, but it's going to come out a filet mignon, a filet mignon for those of you who don't, right? It might go in a poop sandwich, but it's coming out a filet mignon because I'm going to make sure that it happens. And why is that? Well, I watched my dad do it. And at the time I didn't know it, but that's what I was watching. That's what I was witnessing. So by the time I was 13, there was no more of that domestic violence going on in the house. But by the time I'm 18, I'm already out of the house, joined the Marine Corps, and started my military career. The military career handed me its own set of challenges. I was probably just a month or two at my first duty station and found myself facing another horrible trauma as I was sexually assaulted days after my 19th birthday. So I was 18 years old, young, first time away from home. I had just earned the title Marine and gone through all of my military police training and ended up at my first duty station. And I am, raped by a fellow Marine, which again, I'm sitting, actually, it was probably the first time I felt myself mad at God. I was mad. I was mad at God because I thought, my goodness, why are you so mad at me? I don't understand why everything has to be so hard for me and why I have to go through all these things. But again, we don't always know, the future. We just don't know it. And I didn't know that these difficulties, these adversities, and all of these traumas were going to serve me later when I learned how to take those traumas and turn them into ammunition to shoot downrange, into punch combinations, to throw back at life's opponents that come for you. I didn't know that I was going to be able to draw strength from them. And that was a beautiful lesson to learn. So now whenever things go wrong, I kind of get excited at the thought of what I'm supposed to learn from this and how I'm going to grow from it.
Were you always so open with your story, or what was the process like having to share those things?
I would say definitely no. Um, I was not open with my story and didn't talk about anything really in my life. People who served with me during the time that I served knew about the rape and things of that nature. And, there were people who had their own opinions, and there always will be, um, people who believed that I wasn't raped and that I was just lying, which boggles the mind for me. It just really, why would not that it doesn't happen, but it boggles the mind to me why anybody would make something like that up and put themselves out there in a way that's such difficult. To put myself on the road that was, because I reported it. It went through a court martial, so we had a trial. The guy was found guilty, sent to the brig, and eventually processed out of the Marine Corps. So, I had to go through so much scrutiny and, people having their own idea of me and having a whole lot to say about it. And it was really tough. It was a really tough time. So the people that I served with knew about that, but it wasn't like I was sharing so openly about that. So no, I was not always so open. I didn't talk about my childhood. I didn't talk about the beatings that I had to endure and the violence in my home that I had to endure and navigating, trying to understand what was going on with my father, because even though he had those violent episodes, I had a lot of love for my dad. I certainly had a lot of love for my mother. And I don't know, but at a very young age, I seemed to understand that something was wrong with him, and found myself as a child initiating really tough conversations, trying to understand my father. But I didn't talk about those things. It's like I grew up into my young adult life and still had very fond memories of my childhood. I didn't feel like I was an abused child that had gone through all this trauma. I didn't, as far as the child molestation goes, that's something that, I just put into, as you heard me say in my presentation, you throw stuff into your imaginary closet and you close the door. And you continue to navigate in life, throwing things in that closet and shutting the door and just packing it all in there. And then as you get older in life, when stuff stops fitting in there and the door flies open and all of it falls down upon you, you realize, that's when you hear people say, they're standing around, they go, I'm fucked up. I'm fucked up. No, you're not. You're just overwhelmed with all the things that you've shoved into that closet, and then it's all kind of fallen onto you, and you're knocked over on your behind, sitting there going, "My gosh, what do I do? How do I navigate this? I'm going to get my ass kicked here," and that's what I was doing. But I wasn't talking about it. I was not open about domestic violence. I mean, back when I came up, Aaron, this is a completely different generation than you. We weren't talking about mental health, man. Especially not a Latino family, and Black culture. I know this because, obviously my family, I have biracial children, right? So I was raised around Black people. I was raised in all Black church, and I was very close with that culture. Some of my closest, where they say pretend brothers and sisters, play brothers and sisters and cousins are Black, and the cultures are very similar. Black culture and Hispanic culture. We didn't talk about like depression and anxiety and like, oh, I'm having anxiety. Yeah, get out there and mow the damn yard, right? Yeah. It's not like that. So we weren't talking about that stuff. So I didn't think I had anything to really complain about as I was coming in to my law enforcement career. And then I was sexually assaulted, but I'm a Marine by this time. And we military people, particularly, Marine Corps, you're not going to sit there and kumbaya in a circle and talk about your feelings. It just doesn't happen. So no, I was definitely not talking about these things. And even after the shootings happened, I was talking about it in the media, which was very different back then. It was 2013 there was a shift. That was when I got shot in 2013. That was like right before the Ferguson, Missouri incident happened with Darren Wilson. And Officer Darren Wilson went through that with the suspect involved in that case. And I'll tell you that there was a shift that happened there. But prior to that, when my incident happened, uh, we didn't talk about critical incidents. Any cop from this generation and older will tell you that you shut your mouth. You don't talk about it. You don't talk to your partners about it. You don't talk about the details of it. In this case, it was very different because I was asked immediately by my command to do the Today Show interview that I did, and to do Fox and Friends, and to do CNN. And so that was very, very different. So I came out of the gate talking about it in interviews, but it was a very vanilla way of talking about it. It was like what everybody had already seen on the dash cam. I walked up to this car on a traffic stop and they opened fire on me, and I returned fire and they fled and I pursued, and all three are in custody. Or what? That's how it went. But that's not what you saw me talk about. You didn't see me talk about just that. Of course, I talked about that and mentioned it, but that's not the meat and potatoes of what the fight after the fight is. The meat and potatoes of what you saw in that presentation was the fight after the fight. That's what made you feel something.
Well, I just thought it was interesting to know, because I watch videos like that all the time. Maybe the outcome isn't like that, or the cop is the one taking the disadvantaged. But to see you standing there with that experience, that was kind of heavy.
Right. It is unique. The fight after the fight is unique in a lot of ways. It's unique in that it's not every day we get to, and we're starting to see it more and more. And I love, love, love it. I love that more and more law enforcement officers and first responders, to include, our firefighters and some EMTs and dispatchers are starting to stand up and tell their story more publicly. Maybe not at the scale that I'm doing it. But yes, even that. In however, whether you're doing it local, whether they're doing it just for their agencies or at the police academy in their area, or whatever they're doing, to being international like I am, we need more people to do this, because I'm a big firm believer in that human beings learn best from human being stories. I truly believe that. We're inspired most by other human being stories. And so, it is unique in that you have the officer that was involved standing there telling you about it. It's not somebody who worked that case and was the lead investigator in that case, and they're telling you all about it, and they're giving you all of the information based on their investigation. No, this is me. I'm telling you what was going on in the car that you couldn't see while the video is facing forward, right? And you're looking outward, but what's happening inward. The unique angle that the fight after the fight is presented from is it doesn't just look forward at what the camera shows. It looks inward beyond what you didn't see, and it gives you that kind of look into the trauma and the incidents that weren't really talked about. So while I was giving those interviews, I wasn't talking about what was going on behind the scenes. I still was not doing that. In fact, I had been on the speaking circuit for at least a couple of years before the fight after the fight was born. And I started to move more into the aftermath instead of focusing on the incidents, the shootings themselves. I started to talk beyond the tactics of the traffic stop. I started to speak beyond, the tactical lessons that I learned, the tactical mistakes I made, the tactical corrections I made from one shooting to the next. It just started to take on a life of its own in the fact that I believe I needed to tell people what I was truly feeling. There were times I was up there talking and I was having a physiological response to everything I was saying, to the dash cam that I was showing them, but I wasn't talking about that until one day I couldn't hide it anymore. And I wish I could remember what state I was in when it happened, but I couldn't barely speak anymore. My throat was closing. I was so thirsty. My mouth was so dry. My hands were trembling. I wanted to reach for the bottle of water that somebody in the front row was like, "Do you need some water?" And I was like, "Yeah, thanks," Yeah. And then they put the water there. And I still didn't want to reach for it. I used to not even drink water the whole time I was speaking because I didn't want people to see when I grabbed that water bottle and lifted it to my mouth, I didn't want them to see like that, like my hands trembling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't reach for it because I didn't want them to see that. What's crazy is it wasn't until my body literally shut down, like, bitch, we're not talking anymore. Your tongue is going to stick to the top of your mouth and we're not going to work for you anymore because we need some water, right? And I just couldn't hide it. I needed to get some water. And I reached for that water bottle, and sure enough, my hands were trembling. And I was just like, I called myself out on it. I just owned it. And I was like, do you see that? And I remember holding the water bottle. God, if you're listening to House of Burgess right now and you were sitting in on that speaking engagement, that training where I did that, you see this? And I showed everybody like my shaking hands. I would love to know what state I was in when that happened, because that was a defining moment for me, Aaron. That was me giving birth to the fight after the fight. That was really me morphing into the next stage of the journey. And that was to tell people the truth about what I was feeling and why, and what I had truly been experiencing beyond the headlines and the medals and all the accolades and TV interviews, and what's really going on.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
It's a really interesting perspective because as you know, Black and brown communities, sometimes we can be anti-cop as well. And so
Yes.
to be able to come back with this story of not only a Latina or a person of color, but a woman, a female cop, and then the experience that you had that like a lot of male cops don't even go through. It shakes people to hear it. Like everybody that I tell it, grandma, sister, like mom, everybody's just like, wow, like
Yeah.
nobody wants that kind of stuff in their life.
I think just based off my experience from the feedback that I get from people like yourself that have sat through the presentation either once, many, because there's a lot of people who've sat through the fight after the fight multiple times, because it's never exactly the same as the last time. I mean, the details of the incidents and the things that I went through, those don't change, but it's clear to them, the ones who've seen me years ago and then they see me again, it's clear to them, they've watched me morph and change and evolve and grow. They've witnessed the post-traumatic growth. They see it, so they can believe it. I think that's what gives them hope, like, well, damn, when I first met you, I thought I was good, but then now I'm where I believe you were at the time that I saw you. And now I'm seeing you again and you're just doing great and you look like you're doing great. And I truly am. And it just gives them hope. But I think for the most part, what I get from everyone is that when they do look at me and they do listen, they see so much of themselves. Whether they're man or woman, whether they're Black, Hispanic, white, Asian, like it doesn't matter whether they're sworn law enforcement or they're civilian support or they're not law enforcement related at all, because I don't just present to law enforcement. I present to all kinds of different, I speak at universities, I speak for businesses and companies that are not law enforcement related at all, political groups, like you name it, and I'm talking to them, churches, right? But I think people just see themselves, because it's true. It's not just a cop story. It's a human being story. And you may have heard me say that when you were sitting there. It's a human being issue. The fight after the fight is a human being issue. But to see a woman in front of you as a man explaining, and this is just, I'm drawing from feedback. I just got back from Arkansas yesterday, and a lot of them were saying the same things to me that I've heard from other people that have attended these presentations, and they said, like, you hit me, like you broke me down in a way that, nope, it's not easy for people to reach that part of me. But I think I make it okay, because as a man, you watching me, Aaron, I'm a woman, you're a man. I don't know that if it was a man telling the story that I tell, that it would have made you feel okay to feel some of the things you were feeling there. I think that me being a woman also adds to the softness of it. It gives you a little softness, a little, I don't know what the word is, but I'm a woman.
Yeah.
So as a man, Say it again.
naturally you're empathetic because
Mhm.
it's like an unusual situation. I just think it's like a biological thing to see a woman standing before you who has taken something that you would be afraid of and just walking around. I don't know. It does
Yeah.
something to you.
Yeah. I feel like there comes a time where most people are ready to release themselves from the burdens that they carry, from the shit they throw in that invisible closet, you know? And I think most of us reach a point in our lives where we're ready to share some of it. You know, I spoke to a man recently who shared some things with me after my presentation that he said, you know, my wife doesn't even know this. I've never even expressed these things to my wife, but you made me feel seen. Yes, because you know why? It's called standing in your own vulnerability and kind of making friends with it in a sense. Like when I had my invisible closet door, fly open and all my shit flew out and knocked me on my ass and I'm sitting there, in a pile of it. At some point it's like, okay, I have to sit here and make peace with you in some way. I have to sit here and sort through it. It's like any other it's like your real life closet. At some point you have to take clothes out and get rid of that and lighten the load in there so that you can put more clothes, better quality, newer clothes. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you can evolve in your style of how you dress or whatever the case may be. Maybe you were once heavy because I had got super heavy. And then as I grew and shed, a lot of that emotional turmoil, I was able to do the same physically, get healthy again, lose a lot of weight. I've lost over 75 pounds and get healthy again and feel better. It's the same thing, emotionally that we should be doing in our own closets. Pull out the old, get the better, the healthier, the things like that. It's just the problem is you might get to that point, but are you going to do it? And that's the difference between, me and the people who are out here sharing our stories it's the difference is that we've allowed ourselves to step outside of our comfort bubble and share these stories and these experiences that are probably uncomfortable to share, that usually they are. And it's in that vulnerability that's where the real strength is. And it's so crazy because especially, my generation and the older generations, it's like you think strength is keeping it internalized and not showing emotion.
Yeah.
That's how we were raised.
Yeah. I mean,
But
there's
it's
definitely
opposite.
people have different opinions on vulnerability, especially male vulnerability, like how
Mm-hmm.
open you can get. And I think I went through a period of time too where I was a lot more vulnerable more often. And now I'm strategic with it. I'm not I'm okay with being vulnerable. Um, I lean into my strength probably as like a default, especially in like the yeah. But it seems like when you go through something, um, some people call them NDEs, near death experiences, the search for meaning. Like you have to find a way to um, relate it to your life moving forward, or like your destiny. Is that sort of the feeling that you had post experience? Like, did you have a shift in what you felt like your life purpose was?
Absolutely. Because you said, you just said it earlier, like when people go through something and you use the example of the near death experiences, my mother went through that. But I've met people who've gone through that and it changes them because they're trying to make sense of it all. They really are. And they're trying to make sense of it all in terms of, the meaning behind what they experienced, let alone that, but the emotional effects that it's had on them or the physical effects. And trying to explain that to somebody who you feel doesn't understand when not a lot of people have experienced something like that, right? You feel like a fish out of water. You're just so different and nobody's going to get it because you're not supposed to be in that space. You're supposed to be as a fish in the water, swimming in the water, not on land. You're flopping around trying to get air, trying to figure out how to survive out here when you're not supposed to be out here. You're supposed to be over here. And that's how it feels. And that's how it felt for me. I wasn't you know, I felt like, I even had people that called themselves my friend that literally said, I'm tired of hearing you talk about it. And I know, right? And what's crazy is I wasn't even talking about the shootings, with them. They meant like in the media.
Mm.
They were tired of seeing me interviewed on the media. But none of them really tried to have a conversation with me about how I was truly, feeling. Like I had a few there that would check in on me and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" But even then, I wasn't there yet where I could share it. I didn't feel like I could share it. I was trying to make sense of it. It didn't make sense to me that I was crying out of nowhere and trembling all the time. I would tremble and I would get the shakes, and it wasn't even for something that was going on that made me feel afraid. I was a safety of my own home, and that could happen. I could be in the chaos of my job and I would be calm. And I think about that. I would be in the chaos of my job, beyond duty, something chaotic was going on, and I was super calm and very much in my element. The problem was, outside of that chaos, I was not. I was extremely hypervigilant. My stress responses were firing left and right because my amygdala, my nervous system, my prefrontal cortex, all of these things are misfiring, right? Nobody's getting along up there in the brain. Everybody wants to do their own thing. Say again?
The adrenaline while you're at work?
It's a whole thing. It has everything to do with our nervous system. And our nervous system is sending signals to the brain and the amygdala that have everything to do with, controlling our emotions and our fear responses and things like that. The amygdala is shooting this message that you're in danger, and that because the nervous system has sent this message to the brain that that's what's going on, right? And the amygdala is like, something's wrong, and there's nothing really external. There's outside of any external stressor that these things are happening. The brain is operating in a way that it would operate to keep you alive. The stress response. That is one of the biggest things, I think, for me was an aha moment, was learning about those things, learning why the things that were happening, basically. Understanding how the opponent attacks. The opponent attacks utilizing your nervous system and your brain against you. And so your brain is responding as if there's danger at every turn, even when there isn't. It just doesn't know the difference. It can't regulate itself. And that sympathetic nervous system, the one that jumps into action, let's just say when you step off the curb to cross the street and you look to your left and here comes the city bus and you're like, whoa, and that thing zooms on by. Mm-hmm. Or like the traffic officer who's out on a traffic stop and looks over and almost gets nailed by a semi truck who's not paying attention, or whatever the case may be. That all of those feelings. Have you ever got so scared your skin feels prickly? Or you get that light sweat right here just immediately, and you get the goosebumps and the hair on your arms and neck stands.
My armpits start itching sometimes.
The itchies, the pricklies, you get that. Your armpits will itch. I get it on my arms right here. You get the feeling of your stomach falling into your asshole, right? It's like bloop, bloop, bloop. And you're like, oh, right? It's true. Yeah. It's true. That's why you're laughing, because you know it's true. Those feelings when you have a fear response. And you talked about adrenaline, because yes, that's what happens. The brain sends the signals and da-da-da-da-da, and it starts... This nervous system sends the signals to the amygdala, for example, and then you got all of these hormones that are released for the stress response, for the fear response. So you've got all of these copious amounts of adrenaline. The body starts to send all this extra oxygen all throughout the body to the muscles, right? You got glucose, all this extra glucose that shoots. That's all adrenaline related. That's why we feel like when it all calms down, once the sympathetic nervous system has done its job to help keep, because let's just face it, stress is not all bad. Stress can keep you alive. The stress response is specifically designed to keep you alive. And it does a lot of times. The problem is, the tricky part is that the sympathetic nervous system, the one that goes, danger, danger, time to stay alive, Aaron, get your ass up and fight. That girl, she gets all crazy and gets you wound up so you could take action. But then once you're safe, it's that parasympathetic nervous system that comes in with his little, because he just smoked a fatty, and he's like, hey, cool, you made it. Namaste, bro. Calm down. Let's chill out. You made it. Yay for you. Let's hold hands. Let's take some deep breaths and calm down. Like I always imagine this, that the sympathetic nervous system is this neurotic, crazy woman with her hair everywhere and her mascara smeared down and this red lipstick that's all over her teeth. That's what I imagine that the sympathetic nervous system, the amygdala, looks like. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, I have always imagined, when I'm in speaking engagements and I'm saying, like, that's the one that goes, okay, way to go. Like I just described it. Like I imagine him being like this big stoner guy that's just cool. And he just wants to love on you and have you take a nap and chill out. Like, good for you, man. Let's sing Kumbaya and chill out. Like I always imagine that. Now, that being said, you have these two polar opposites in the same brain. And they're supposed to work individually, and one is supposed to counteract the other, and they have good synergy that way. The problem is when the parasympathetic nervous system, that stoner dude, is just way too overwhelmed by this chick, the sympathetic nervous system. And he's like, no, dude, she's too much. Like, that is enough. I can't deal. Nope, I'm checking out. I'm smoking this big fatty, and I'm going to go to sleep.
So it didn't allow you to calm back down.
Correct. He doesn't do his job. So he's checked out. And what ends up happening in the brain is that those stress signals that are sent to the brain and the nervous system and all that, they keep going and they stay in this active state. And the brain's not designed to be in that state, in that hypervigilant state all the time, right? And it misfires. The amygdala and the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex and the vagus nerve and all of the things that get turned on when the alarm sounds, all of those things, like the firefighters, when their little beep, when their little alarm sounds and they all run and they slide down the little pole and everybody gets all geared up and onto the engine, onto the fire truck or whatever. There's so many things inside of us that are doing that in order to keep us alive and clear of danger and survive, because that's the brain's job, to help us survive. But what happens is when the brain becomes slightly injured and doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, which helps to stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system, they're all compromised and they're not doing their jobs right. And so it's not easy for the parasympathetic to do its job and come and calm down the brain, the sympathetic. So the sympathetic just runs the show. And can you imagine some crazy neurotic woman with mascara running down and red lipstick and all over her teeth, and she's like, and she's running the show? That's not the person we want running the show all the time. And that's what happens in some instances with people who have, a post-traumatic injured brain, is they're having this response when it's not appropriate and they can't help it. And so a lot of times people who are dealing with a post-traumatic stress injury or post-traumatic stress issues that go unresolved, they are exhausted. A lot of them are exhausted because this will likely disrupt their sleep patterns, their ability to sleep, to fall asleep, to stay asleep, to get even a little bit close to achieving REM sleep, which is where we need to be to refresh. And all of that is compromised. And their wellness begins to deteriorate. And what starts to deteriorate first is what? Your mental health. Because there's a lack of understanding of what's going on. I didn't know what was going on. Here's what I know. I knew what I was supposed to do to handle the shootings. I knew what I needed to do when I walked up to that car and they opened fire on me and shot me twice. I knew what I needed to do. because I'd prepared for that. But nobody prepared me for the fight after the fight. So I didn't even know there was one. I had no idea there was an opponent there. So I didn't prepare for that opponent. And because I didn't, for many years, I suffered at the hands at the attack of my opponent being post-traumatic stress, which ultimately, led me to a post-traumatic stress injury. And as did my children, because if one person's affected and it could be the mom, the dad, whomever, but any person with a close relationship, and I told you guys this in Sacramento, with a close relationship with a survivor of trauma, can be prime pickings. Any person with a close relationship puts themselves at risk of dealing with that trauma that person, their loved one, is dealing with vicariously through them due to their close relationship and their firsthand account of that trauma through the person that they love. So my children began to suffer with anxiety and depression. Why? Because mom was. It's like it's contagious. It's this cancer that spreads, and that's what happened.
But what if a person has so much trauma from their childhood, like they don't even know what the incident is? You have very clear examples of traumatic experiences. Some folks, my mom, for instance, she has some of those symptoms, but I wouldn't even know where to start. Maybe she knows.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the question should be posed, does she know? Yeah. Right? Does she know where it comes from? A lot of times we do, and sometimes we don't. Those memories are suppressed in our childhood, which is what happens when the brain's trying to protect you. It's a survival coping mechanism that happens in children quite often, where they just shut down and the brain protects itself from that trauma. It's like, nope, and just covers it up. And people will grow from childhood into adulthood having physiological responses to certain things, but not really understanding why. So your question is, what do you do if, unlike me, that has clear memory of these things and what was going on in my life, what do they do? Well, this is why it's so important to see a doctor. This is why it's so important to lean into the support of a trained clinician who's trained to help you get to the root of what this could potentially be. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I'm trained in peer support, but I'm not at the level, say, my niece is, or, what some doctors are. Mm-hmm. That being said, you don't have to be a doctor to go and learn from these doctors. And I've spent a lot of years in therapy. I continue to seek therapy on a maintenance level to deal with things and help me navigate things as they come. Life changes happen. Life continues to throw punches at me. It doesn't care what I've survived and how much growth I have achieved up to now. Life still goes on and still has its challenges that I have to face. And so that being said, I lean into that. I lean into my team. You heard me talk about that, my corner team, right? In the fight after the fight, I talk about how important it is to have a corner team. I didn't win championships as a fighter by myself. I had a strong corner team comprised of a trainer, a trainer, a cutman, a trainer, which is the psychologist. I make that comparison, right, in the presentation. The trainer, the cutman, the nutritionist, the sparring partners. Like, it takes a village to create a fight champion. Yeah. And the same thing goes here. If you don't have memory of something and you feel like you're experiencing some type of distress emotionally, or you're having these physiological responses. Let's just say a young boy was sexually assaulted or molested as a child. Young boy or girl is molested. They grow up into their young adult life and they're realizing that they're having sexual difficulties and issues sexually, but they don't know why, because there's no real memory of this. I had a really good friend who had no memory of why she felt the way she was feeling. And it wasn't until she got older and she had a child of her own, and then she started having these nightmares, and a lot of that started to come to the forefront of her brain. she began working with a psychologist that helped her navigate that and kind of uncover what was going on or what had gone on there. So that's my answer. Go to the doctor, get some help, do the work to figure it out. I had to do that. And that's why I know so much about what I'm telling people in these presentations, not because I'm a doctor, but because I've lived it and I've researched it and I've studied this opponent. Like, I investigated it like it was a murder suspect. I wanted to know everything about how, why, how it was affecting me, why it was affecting me, and how it was affecting my family, my children, my husband, all of these things. I had to figure it out myself. I had to kind of sit there and take ownership of it completely, extreme ownership, as Jocko Willink and Leif Babin say. I don't know if you've heard of that, right? Extreme ownership. Take the ownership of what's happening. Yeah, I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what was going on, but I certainly knew that I was not okay. And while people will kind of spew that out, it's okay to not be okay. Yeah, it is okay to not be okay. It's not okay to not be okay and do nothing about it. That's not okay. We've got to own it, and then we've got to take action. And I had to do that, and that's what I did. The shootings, Aaron, they were not easy to navigate physically, in the moment, tactically. They were challenging. But those were taking those bullets and going through those shootings. That was the easy part.
Yeah.
That's the easy part. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know if how far you wanted to go into the incidents for the shootings for the purposes of your questions that you emailed me. Did you want to go and talk about some of those things?
Well, so I want the perspective of, you work in law enforcement. I'm around people who are critical of law enforcement. I work for the commission. What do you think folks need to understand who are on neither side about being in law enforcement as a person of color, the procedures that are in place, the trainings that you have, that can, you're trying to make the community safe. They put your life in danger. What do you feel are some misconceptions that people have of law enforcement?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people who have disdain for law enforcement think that we get up in the morning with an itchy trigger finger and we just look forward to going out there and shooting some people and taking lives. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. So I'm very, very newly retiring from law enforcement, like in the last week or so. And in all the years that I served, because I've got over 22, 23 years of combined civilian and military police experience, and I have never met anyone like that. Never. That just wanted to kill someone, just, for the sake of that. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, is that that's what we want to do. I will say another big misconception is that we're all racist people. Racism exists in law enforcement. Why? Because people in law enforcement are human beings, and racism exists, unfortunately, amongst the human race. There's nothing that can be done about that. There are racist doctors and teachers, and there are racist bankers, and there are racist, bus drivers and librarians, and, you name it. Racism exists. To expect that there is no racism in law enforcement is unreasonable. But to expect that to blanket the entire profession of law enforcement as racist people is also very unreasonable. There are a lot of really great men and women in this profession who do not care what person's race is, right? So the big misconception is that we're all racist and that we all want to kill people. And the fact of the matter is, there are thousands and thousands of law enforcement officers across the country who struggle, deeply struggle, with having had to shoot someone and kill someone and take a life, as well as in the military. Taking a life is something that I've never had to do, although I've shot people. I've never killed anyone. And it was still very difficult for me to, I still think about, for example, the person that was involved in my first on-duty shooting, the young man that I shot. I pray for that guy, I don't want to kill anyone, and I didn't shoot him because I was aching to kill him. So I think those are two really big misconceptions: racism, that we want to kill people. Here's another thing that I think that I have a problem with people saying about law enforcement officers. That's what you signed up for, so I don't feel sorry for you. Well, that's not right, because I didn't sign up to be shot in the face and, have my boob shot off and, have my family and children suffer the way that they did. And I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to do the thing that most people don't want to do. So I did know what I was signing up for when I became a cop, in that I knew the dangers. But that doesn't make me more or less. Let me just say that doesn't make me less entitled to someone being respectful of my life. That's ridiculous. And that is just horrible. That's a horrible thing to say to anybody. That's like saying to somebody, who joins the military and goes into a field that deploys and fights wars for this country. That's what they signed up for. They signed to defend the country's honor. They signed up. They didn't sign up to go, I want to sign up for the U.S. Marine Corps infantry unit because I want to go die. That is not what people sign up for. They sign up because they want to do what most people are too afraid to do. And that's hard. But some people are wired that way. I'll go run toward that dangerous alley where all the gunfire's coming from, like Las Vegas, police, when the sniper was shooting down, killing everybody at that concert, they ran toward the danger, like so many of our officers do. They run toward the danger when everybody's running away. And, same for our military. They go and they fight for our freedoms, not because they want to die, but because they know that's their job. So yeah, it is our job, and we do understand the dangers of our job, but my God, does that make me any less entitled to leaving and going home at night with my life intact? It does not. And I think it's a horrible thing to take that attitude against all men and women in law enforcement and in the military, who are the ones that step up and answer the call when most of the community won't do that. That's hurtful. It hurts our feelings. And believe you me, we have them. We have feelings. We are people.
That makes sense to me. You do strike me as a person that doesn't overly invest in what other people think, but I can see how those things would be deeply, deeply hurtful, especially when you do have children who need their mom and those sorts of things.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't overly invest in what people think too much, because I like to stand. I know who I am, and I know what I stand for. And I would be a liar if I said it didn't hurt my feelings, during some of the times that I navigated this career and just felt like all this hate. It's like, you don't know me. You don't know what I would be willing to do for you. I would give my life for years, and you don't even like me. I don't even know you. And that takes a special person to do that, to be willing to do that. I am the last person to say that we do not have those in this profession that do not represent with honor, integrity. And I am the last person to say that there's no one in the profession who shouldn't be here. I would never say that. I'd be the last person, because I know it's true. I know that there are people in law enforcement who shouldn't be here. I know that there are a lot of men and women in law enforcement who don't take ownership of their responsibility and the oath that they took. I know that. I acknowledge that. But to say that we are all like that is just a bunch of bullcorn. We're not all like that. We're not all good and we're not all bad. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I certainly didn't sign up to be a cop so that I can be killed and ambushed and shot multiple times. But I understand that can come with the dangers of the job. The reality of the job is such that we could potentially leave the house and not return. But damn, like, I have kids and I'm a mama and they want their mama to come home and I'd like to come home to them, I'm a person first and foremost, but I have a job to do. And I don't know any other profession that people get treated the way that we get treated simply because we're doing our jobs. And people are so quick to turn the lens of you're being racist onto us. And it's funny to hear that because I've been called a racist many times. You're doing that because I'm black and you hate black people. Really? Really? Because they don't even know anything about me. They don't know that I got a little Blexican girl at home, right? My little Blexican of a biracial, beautiful child, a husband who's a black man. Like, this is just ridiculous. So, you never know anyone's life and the shoes that they walk in. But that also applies to me as the cop. I also apply that to myself and go, hey, why is this person responding like this to me as a cop? Why is she deathly? I pulled over a woman one time and she didn't want to lower her window past this much. And she was being difficult and belligerent and uncooperative and rude and loud. And I was like, but she looked scared to me. I mean, when you scare me, I'm going to come across angry. That's my first fear response right there is fight. That's my fear response, right? So you might not know that the reason I'm coming at you so strong and so fierce, it looks like anger and it looks like aggression, but it's because I'm scared, right? And to me, that's what I was seeing in this woman. She looked scared. And so I remember saying to her just really calmly, I was like, are you scared of me? Because it bothered me. I was like, wait a minute, are you scared of me? And Erin, this woman started crying. This is a traffic stop in Stafford when I worked there. She started to cry when I said, are you scared of me? I didn't hit her back with the same energy she was giving me. And I know how to do that. And sometimes you have to. When someone goes up here, you got to go up here to bring them back down. And then you've got to be able to bring yourself back down here too, right? And I tend to be very good at that. But in this situation, she went up high and to the left. And I was like, she looks like a scared child to me. And she's acting in a way that, like a dog, when it's hurt and you go to help it and it snaps at you. It's not snapping at you because it wants to be mean. It's scared and it's hurt, right? That's what I saw. And I just remember saying, are you scared of me? And she started crying. And I said to her, oh, you have no reason to be scared. I am the last person that's going to hurt you. And I will tell you that as I'm standing out here right now, as long as I'm right here outside of your car door, nobody is going to hurt you. Nobody's going to hurt you as long as I'm standing here with you. And I just remember this, she had a really heavy emotional response to that. And I said, why don't you do this, honey? Why don't you pull up ahead to that gas station up there? It's well lit. There's lots of lighting up there. We can go up there if that'll make you feel better. And she was like, yes, please. And we did. And we moved up there and the traffic stop went well. I gave her a warning I don't know if I gave her a warning or a ticket, whatever it was. I finished my business. I highly doubt I even gave her a ticket in that situation. But I did conclude the traffic stop and, she thanked me for it. Thank you for being, the contact that she had before was the reason why she acted that way. I just can hope and pray that the contact she had with me moving forward could in some way change that response for the next person in law enforcement that she's contacted by.
Yeah, and you're a person who is very brave and courageous, and so you're able to handle those situations with tact and grace for folks. But I think it's a stretch to say that most people in law enforcement have the ability to do that. So I can see where folks will have different experiences. I personally have never had an experience where I feel like or felt like my life was at risk from law enforcement. Some people are taken back by that, but that's just my experience. But I definitely have had family members who have had negative experiences and feel that they were targeted and abused, and
I mean, my own son has had an experience in which, it didn't rub him right. It was when he explained to me what happened. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way that he was dealt with and the way that he was talked to. And I myself have had that experience with some law enforcement officers who didn't know that I was in law enforcement. And, and in that situation, when he came at me the way he came at me, and then I barked back, "Hey, I get it. I'm tired too. I'm a cop too." And then it was like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me that?" I'm like, "It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter, right? I shouldn't have to tell you that." So, that goes back to what I said. Like, everybody is human, and not everybody is perfect. There are a lot of people in any profession that don't have the emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, I think, is even more, it's way more important than, the regular, the IQ test and all that. The EQ test, that's the real barbacoa right there, I think. A lot of people do not have the emotional intelligence, the level of emotional intelligence that they should have. And when you're in a profession, when you're dealing with people at a highly emotional level, a very dangerous situation, profession, you're going to want your people to have high levels of emotional intelligence. You're going to want them to understand how their nervous system works, their stress response works. You're going to want them to have the ability to regulate their own emotional responses. And that all comes with training. We have to understand how it all works. There's no police training up until I did it myself that taught me about emotional regulation, that taught me about the stress response and why that worked. I was told that I was having an adrenaline dump the first time I ever had and experienced the adrenaline dump, and how that, that fatigue and that loss of fine motor skill and all of that. I didn't know what it was, but I remember being in the Marine Corps and one of the salty, crustier Marines telling me, "Oh, you're having an adrenaline dump." I didn't know what that was. I was just like, holy cow, I could not keep my eyes open. We had just had some, one of my first high stress things go on. And I didn't know what it was. And I was like, "Well, what is that?" And the explanation was, that's just what happens to you after the shit hits the fan. You could feel like that sometimes. Oh, okay. But I didn't know why. And not until way after my second shooting that I truly learned. Now, I learned a little bit about it in my boxing career, but I never really learned how it works. I think it should be a focal point for training law enforcement officers at the ground level in the academy. We should be teaching them about their nervous systems. We should be teaching them how they work when confronted with copious amounts and sudden onsets of stress. And we should make sure that they gain an understanding and an insight to how that works, how that affects them, how unresolved stress can affect them, not only their mental health, but their physical wellness, all the things. That's why I created a program around that, which is part 2 of the series. Train to Win delves into all of that. The Fight After the Fight, Train to Win, goes into all of that. And I'll even take it a step further. The law enforcement officer who goes through an entire career not having that kind of training then retires and cannot understand why he or she is having all of the physical ailments that they are having, why they can't sleep, why they gain so much weight or lose so much, whatever the case may be, why they're having gastrointestinal issues. A lot of them end up with, because they have all of this unresolved, unaddressed stress going through their bodies. When my significant other now retired recently, one of the first things that I told him is, "I'd love for you to just do nothing." Because he's like, "What am I going to do?" He moved down here to be with me from the state he retired in. And he's like, "Gosh, what am I going to do?" And I said, "You're going to heal. I want you to take at least 3 to 4 months and heal yourself. And he's like, heal myself from what? And I was like, from 25 years of law enforcement service, this is his second retirement. He's got a military retirement as well. So there's that, right? But I want you to heal your nervous system. I want you to get your circadian rhythms back into order. That regulates our sleep patterns. All these years with shift work and being called out in the middle of the night to investigate crimes when you're in the investigations division, and, just everything, all the stress that comes with it. You're talking about cops who go into retirement, not understanding why they can't get their sleep patterns underway, not understanding that they could be suffering from this, that, and the third because they're dealing with adrenal fatigue. Our adrenaline is like every day, every shift for years upon end. Tell me you don't think that's going to affect the body, the psyche, like law enforcement, what it demands from the people who step up and answer the call is almost next to impossible.
I love that for your partner, that you're inviting him to just,
yes.
I had the chance to meet him. He's a great
yes.
guy.
Heal. Yes, you got to meet him, right? Yes, you got to meet Mateo, and I think he even told you he was just freshly retired, and that's what we're working on. We're working on, let's heal. Let's get you in with a good therapist that fits for you, for what you're retiring from, because that's always important too. When you're looking for a therapist, you want to find the right therapist. Are we dealing with trauma? Then you better get someone who specializes in trauma. What kind of trauma are we dealing with? Are we dealing with, addictions? What are we dealing with? And then find a therapist that, is better suited to that. And some of your listeners might be out there, well, fuck, I don't know what I'm dealing with, Ann. What if we don't know what we're dealing with? Oh, I know, because I didn't know what I was dealing with. But the idea was to find a therapist that's a good fit for you. So when I say good fit for you, outside of the gate, it's somebody that you can have a good energy with, because it will be an energy exchange. And then you go from there as you start to navigate those sessions and figure out what some of these issues are, what's better suited to you. What type of therapy, what technique is better suited for you? People don't even realize that all of that stuff exists in therapy today, and that there are so many choices when it comes to healing your brain and seeking counseling and therapy. You have people who don't like to talk to people. I don't want to lay and talk and tell a stranger all my business. Okay, there are certain types of therapies where there's a heck of a lot less of that. Neurofeedback therapy, go down the rabbit hole of that. You just sit there, put something on your head, and you stare at a screen and you watch something. Now, there is some dialogue, obviously here and there, but the most part, you're not doing that. I don't remember who it was. I think it was my son or somebody told me, I don't want to lay on a sofa and tell about all my problems. I'm like, nobody does that anymore. Nobody's laying on the sofa and kicking their feet up. Like, it's so different.
So you're a big proponent of therapy. There are a lot of people that don't, like, to this day, they coming back around saying that therapy is for people that are privileged to sit and talk about their problems. But there's much more to it.
There is. And again, this is going back to you taking ownership. Like, I have to take ownership of it. So what can I control? Well, I can control, the therapist I use, the frequency in which I go, how often I'm really applying the tools. Am I really applying it, or am I just sitting there talking, listening, and then I walk out the door and I don't use any of it? I don't even think about it again. If the therapist gave me exercises and challenges to do, I completed them. If it didn't feel like a good fit for me, I started to discuss that it didn't feel like a good fit for me and why it didn't feel like a good fit for me. And do I need to go elsewhere? If medication was presented as a strategy, I discussed my disdain for medicine and how I really don't like to take medicine and I don't want to screw with my brain that way. And then we discussed how these types of medicine were going to help calm certain things in my brain that were keeping me from absorbing all of the therapy and all of the lessons because I wasn't getting any sleep. Mm-hmm. And your anxiety is through the roof, and we have to get that under control before we can move forward with this training. It's like a bad shoulder. I can't train for a championship fight if I have a bad shoulder. I can't spar, I can't hit the bags, the mitts. It's going to hinder me. So how about we get the shoulder issue under wraps? Okay, fine. You're going to have to go to physical therapy or you're going to have to take these meds. Okay, I'll do it. So that's what I did. And I took the medicine for a little bit, even though I didn't want to. I made the decision, taking ownership for it. I made the decision to commit. I'm going to commit to this strategy and I'm going to do the work. And when I did that, it worked for me. I didn't have to stay on the medicine forever. I haven't been on medication for years and years and years. I have been able to utilize the tools that I learned in therapy and apply them in ways that helped me offset when I could feel anxiety creeping in. So it's not like I don't ever feel anxiety anymore. I just understand it. I know the writing on the wall. I know what's happening, and I know how to use my tools to offset it. I see my therapist, or I have virtuals either, here or on the phone, or in person. I do that on a regular, I'll go right now. For example, I'll use right now. Every 3 months, I want to get in. Why? Because I'm pouring into people across the country and outside of the people on a very regular basis. And I don't want to be a bullshitter. I'm not going to be a bullshitter. I'm not going to stand in front of you and tell you I'm doing all these things right, and behind the scenes, I'm a hot mess. No. Anybody in my personal life can tell you that I apply what I am talking about. I challenge you to talk to people who know me in my personal life. I apply it. I'm very transparent about the fact that I still have crappy days, but I have a therapist that I talk to help me navigate things, life changes, difficulties, my divorce when I went through my divorce, the life changes of things that I had to deal with my children and my family. And that's what one has to do. I think that's probably the most important part, Aaron, is to quit blaming everybody else and handle your business. I don't blame anyone for the mistakes that I made in the fight after the fight, and when I was going through that dark time after those 2 shootings. I don't blame anyone for the fact that I cursed at my children and I cussed out my ex-husband, and I was disrespectful, and that I was just a horrible person to live with. I think I was intolerable. I was angry all the time and full of rage, and I didn't know what was happening to me for so long. And so because of that reason, they suffered and I suffered. But I finally had to say, I don't want to do that to them anymore, and do the work. And I worked very hard.
Yeah, you turned it around. And for me, you're like a superhero. I can see how you're a good fighter because of how hard you fight for other people. And I'm glad you're doing that work.
Aw, thank you. Thank
So,
you. That's so
I
cool.
appreciate you having this conversation. There's a lot of great gems. I'm going to have a blast editing this.
Yes.
Lastly, who are 2 people you think would be a good fit to follow up your conversation, and then where can people find you?
Oh, I have so many. I would definitely have to say that one of the most inspiring human beings who inspires me in my life would have to be Matias Ferreira. Have you ever heard of him? Matias Ferreira is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who had his legs blown off while he was serving on a deployment. He is New York Police Department first double amputee law enforcement officer. And that's just one of the amazing things about him. He's an amazing father. He's got a beautiful wife, beautiful daughters. He is a guy who is a standout in the community. He's a giver of himself. He's always out there trying to help other people, inspire other people, give back to the community, give of himself to others. I'm really proud to call him a friend, a brother Marine. But he inspires me because he does not make excuses for himself or his situation. The guy is I don't want to misspeak, but I think he's a jiu-jitsu blue belt at this point. He has no legs, Aaron. Right? He has 2 per 6. He runs marathons. He participates in all kinds of sporting events. Like, there's no stopping this guy. He has such a great attitude. He just epitomizes resiliency and hope and inspiration. And I know him. And so I know for a fact that he still has his bad days. But man, I got to tell you, if there's anyone else that I can look at that is on the same mission that I am, and that is to show people that you have a choice how you navigate the punches that your opponent throws at you. You have a choice how you navigate life's punches and adversities and traumas. You can either lie down and lick your wounds, whether physical or invisible wounds. You can lie there and lick your wounds and feel freaking sorry for yourself and woe is me. Or you can do what Marines do. You can get your ass up, regroup, reassess, and re-engage in life. And I watch him do that. I watch him do it often, and he is definitely somebody that I would say you should talk to. He is my brother from another mother, and he actually is. We had a conversation once, and he said to me, "You know what, Ann? God chose us." When I think about him, I think about that. God chose us. He just because it's easy when you're doing this thing and you're on the speaker circuit and you're out there just trying to really inspire people. It's easy to sometimes feel like you're not making a difference because you're out there and you're doing it so much. And I get emails and I get a lot of feedback, and I know that, what I'm doing is important and holds value. But sometimes, that little self-doubt creeps into your head and you just wonder, are people really hearing me? Or sometimes I think maybe I'm not doing it right. And I worry that, God has me on this journey, but maybe I'm not doing it right the way he wants me to. And Matthias and I both believe in God, and we're both very spiritual in that regard. And so it's something that I think about. I remind myself, and he says that God chose us. God chose us, Ann. He's a wonderful man. He's an impressive human being.
Well, it certainly felt like God put you in my life when I went up there to see you randomly and had no idea you'd be there, and got to hear your story, and then got to reflect on my own trauma and what my cousin's passing meant to me and what the effect of that was. So very thankful that you gave me the time to sit down and speak with you.
Thank you.
And materialize it for my world, because now I get to share the conversation and make it real for folks in my life, for my family.
Well,
so
that's good. I'm glad that I could, inspire you that way. I am sure all your guests, leave a piece of themselves with you. I would say that the second person that I think you should talk to, now, do they have to be in law enforcement?
No.
Because there's lots of people that I know who are incredibly inspiring that are not in law enforcement.
I'm actually wrapping up a series on law enforcement, legal, everything that has to do with law enforcement. So you're a very important piece to this project.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Another person that I find really inspiring is a good friend of mine, and she's been through a heck of a lot of trauma. She is the widow of an officer who has passed. He was my battle buddy, and he took his own life in 2019. And I think where grief is concerned, where trauma is concerned, where motherhood is concerned, where being judged because you aren't mourning in a way that's maybe fits what everybody feels like you should be doing, and I think that is a common thing. I know it's definitely a topic that I have covered on my own podcast that we're relaunching, is grief. Right, grief is a tricky thing, and it's very personal. But I have to tell you, this person has every reason to curl up and crawl into her little foxhole and never come out, and she just doesn't do it. Her name is Christy Scott, and I can make sure that you have a contact information from her. But she goes out whenever she's asked, and it doesn't happen very often, but she does. She has gone out and spoken. She did it with, Scotty. We called him Scotty. His name is Charlie Scott. And you could actually Google Charlie Scott in Fort Bend County and read his story. He was involved in a very high profile shooting, and he was shot multiple times. And he just was never really the same when he came back to duty. So there is some connection to law enforcement, but she's not in law enforcement, and I just really feel like she would be a great person for you to talk to, because she's had to navigate some really tough waters, and I've watched her do it with grace, and she continues to be an amazing mom, doing the best that she can, like so many of us, we moms across the country. And I really am inspired by her. And I tell her often, because I feel like it's important that we should tell people who inspire us that they inspire us. There's a lot of people out there who inspire me. I could rattle names off to you of people that you could talk to. And I'm certainly willing to always help you find people for your podcast too, Aaron. But yeah, Christy Scott and Matias Ferreira would be two of the top ones that I would tell you that, yeah, you should reach out to them. She's an inspiring human being, and I don't even you'll know it. Mm-hmm. You'll know it immediately. Both of them.
Sure, you'll know it. Be able to tell. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And then what did you say the last part of that double question was?
Your handles.
What are my handles? What are my handles?
I've got them, but
you have them. So listen, I'm on Instagram. Officer Ann Carrizales. You can find me that way. And Instagram, my handle is, what is it? It's at the fight after the fight. Shouldn't I know this by it's at the fight after the fight. I don't ever really push my socials. I really have to get better at this. And on Facebook, I'm on Facebook as well. And on Facebook, who am I on Facebook? I know that it's under Officer Ann Marie Carrizales, but I don't know the whole thing, the little handle. What is it on Facebook?
Yeah, but it's important because you do peer support for folks,
yes,
enforcement, and
so I put that up, and I put that out there in terms of how to find me. But what I always tell people is go to Facebook, type in Officer Ann Marie Carrizales, and you'll find me. There it is.
There you go.
I don't know what the handle is. How do you even find that dang thing? How do you even find the doggone handle? Anyway, it might be You Go, I Go, if I'm not mistaken. Who knows? But if you type in Officer Ann Marie Carrizales on Facebook, you'll find it. I'm on Instagram, on TikTok. These people know how to find me. And I know you will have the handles, and you can put it on your little...
I'll put in the bio or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we didn't get too much into the details of the traffic stops and the shootings and stuff like that. But, honestly, I think that you covered the stuff that people really want to hear, and people should hear, and hope that you will be able to reach them with what we did talk about. There's a lot more out there, good than bad. And so if you're sitting, listening, watching, just imagine you ever had a bad kiss. It didn't stop you from trying again, man. So come on, give it a shot. Keep an open mind. Remember that people are just people. And while there's no room for racism in any profession or in any walk of life here on this earth, it exists. I think we should just be careful not to do the same thing that we don't want done to us. I don't want anybody to take an attitude toward me because I'm a woman, and they have these negative connotations of women, or because I'm a Latina and they don't like Latinas, or, because I'm a police officer, right? Any more than anybody who's Black wants to be treated a certain way because they're a Black man or they're a Black woman. We should all stop doing that. Mm-hmm. And in trying to get our point across, we shouldn't do the very thing to someone else that we're complaining about. At the end of the day, you might have someone standing over here and another person standing over here in front of a number 6, and to one person it's a 9, and to the other person it's a 6, but neither one of them are wrong. So I think it's about understanding one another as human beings and trying to keep from doing the one thing that we're standing up against to other people in trying to get our own point across. That's what I hope to see happen, hope to see more of. And so that's the only thing I can do is take ownership of myself and my actions. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take this information out there so people get an understanding and get some insight into what this can look like for me as a human. Because at the end of the day, that's truly what I am. And at the end of the day, whether you're Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, like, we're people. And the fight after the fight is a people problem. And so we should really be trying to draw from one another to navigate it and make it through.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.